For this week's World Triathlon podcast, we're delighted to welcome Belgium's Claire Michel. Currently 12th in the Olympic rankings, Claire is a key member of the Belgian Hammers mixed relay team, looking to make its Olympic debut in Tokyo, but like everyone, preparations have been thrown into the air by the coronavirus. Not like everyone though, you were recovering from a broken leg after an accident. So Claire, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Did that accident mean that the extra year is actually a very precious opportunity?
Yeah, I think I might have been very much in the minority that when the Olympic Games were officially postponed, it was honestly a bit of a stress relief for me, because the rehab was just it's slow. I anticipated it being lengthy, at least that's what the doctors had told me. But I still wasn't expecting it to be as long and as hard as it has been. So anyways, yeah, the extra year is actually a bit welcome.
You're still kind of in a slight recovery, or have you just given yourself more time, I guess, as well?
Probably a combination of both. I think I've given, we were really looking to we had a hard deadline and we knew it. And I already had adapted it, let's say, my the accident, what happened was, it was the first day of vacation. So I just finished the last World Cup of the season, got home from Japan the next morning out on my city bike. So that was end of October that I fell and broke my patella. So that was 3 months in a full leg brace, and then about 3 months just to get the knee bending back again, which was a bit surprising, to be honest. I'd had other, let's say stress fractures and other small injuries, but I wasn't expecting, this much, just relearning how to walk. And, especially in the beginning, I had to be really careful about not, the patella itself was in 7 different pieces. So I had to be really careful about not moving it, not displacing the pieces. They were also a bit on the limit of what, the knee itself could on its own heal. There was like 6 or 7 millimeters between the different fragments, let's say the different bone fragments. So yeah, it was a bit delicate, but I was astonished by how much, I lost like 5 centimeters of like muscle atrophy around my thigh, and a lot of like motor control skills, just, yeah, like I said, the small, so that's just been a slow process. And now I'm back running. Biking and swimming is more or less normal.
Right.
The benefit, I would say, also is that I had basically already, before the corona crisis, had basically kind of created my own home gym and had a Vasa trainer so that I could swim a bit before I could actually get in the pool. And so I actually had a lot of equipment at home that I had collected because, I couldn't drive, I couldn't walk, I couldn't usually leave my apartment because we didn't even have an elevator. So it was always like sitting on my bum and going down the stairs. So just like, I actually was quite well set up at home, to be honest.
The apocalyptic bunker is quite well.
Yeah,
Tins of food all up in the larder, everything.
Yeah. So I mean, I had borrowed stuff from friends also that had different equipment, or I was lockdown ready, let's say. And then also even like the mental aspect of, in my head, I had already prepared to not be ready to race until June or July. Knowing that, I was hoping I was going to get a race or 2 in before the Olympics, but, the Olympics were obviously the big goal of the season. So yeah, had already kind of made a bit of a shift. And then I think that one, like a lot, I think, I was listening actually to Tyler Mislechuk's podcast, and he was also saying, and it's true, you saw athletes kind of doing either coping it with the lockdown in different ways, and either going into full training mode or taking a step back. And I also and our coach had a very like sustainable approach, let's say. And that's also what we did with this rehab process.
And I mean, as far as like the rehab, the process goes, is it something that does the national sports setup kind of scoop you up and say, right, we've got this for you, like, this is all going to help? Or are you somewhat left to your own devices and then they bring other things into the mix? Or will your trainer be very on hand the whole time? How does that sort of work itself out?
The rehab, I kind of have a team that I'm used to working with, let's say here in Belgium. That's also why it made sense for me to stay, because otherwise, I train with the triathlon squad, and we're more of, let's say, like a nomadic group. So usually based at least this last year, they were based in Montegordo in Portugal for December, January, February, March. And then, for the rest of the season, let's say like April until, normally November, we just kind of go from training camp, race, and follow the circuit. But that also means we don't have necessarily like a staff that follows with us. So I stayed in Belgium and worked with my normal physio, but the Olympic Committee also has, let's say, kind of a team of doctors and core specialists, let's say, that you have access to. So that was really nice, and just kind of pretty quickly established, like, okay, this is actually the hospital right where I was taken happened to be one of the knee specialists, one of the best knee specialists and surgeons in Europe, and he was one who ultimately said I would actually avoid surgery, and really trusted him, and he followed up every 2 weeks with scans. And then each specialist also kind of had their moment, because in the beginning it's really all about consolidation, and then the next phase, I was going to see my physio every day, actually, or 4 or 5 days a week, to just work on bending, and it was just trying to get 30 degrees of flexion, 40 degrees of flexion, and it was
Wow.
really
Tedious.
yeah, very, very tedious, very slow process. And,
Mm.
you know, um, a ton of Ubers, because
Yeah.
still couldn't drive at that point.
Oh god, and your
And
leg's still dead straight in the plaster as well. So you're
yeah, it's kind
always
of
getting across.
silly. Yeah, because I wasn't fitting in any front seats of any car, so I'd have to sit across the entire back row of a car, and so and you're there with your crutches, and you're coming down, sitting on your bum to go down the stairs and go up it's just it looks a bit hodgepodge. Let's just call that what it is.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was kind of just a lot of also little exercises. And I remember the first time also, I'm laying there on the table, and she's okay, just lift your leg off the table, and my quad is shaking, and I'm trying as hard as I can. It's as if I'm doing, like 100 kilo
Mm.
squat. You're just like, "Ah!" And I was just shocked, because she's helping me. She had, my physio has her hand underneath my ankle, but I could hardly lift my own leg, and I thought, oh my god, this is their starting point. But
Yeah.
it's okay. It's just you just try to take it day by day. And
And then they start to bring out the cool kit, like the anti-gravity or the no zero gravity.
then from there, then you start, after the, let's say, the physios, really, we've gotten to a point of flexion where you can start to do exercises, then you really move into a lot of rehab. And that's been a big part of my program now also, is working with kind of a strength coach that's really helping me even out the imbalances left and right, and trying to avoid compensating. And
Mm.
even riding my bike, I'm constantly looking at my power meter to see my left right balance, and just all those details that it's brain retraining, really, to
Yeah.
reteach your body how to do all those things. And um yeah,
Mm.
so same thing in the pool, even kicking, flip turns, yeah, very, very basic stuff. And then here on the run, it's the same thing as trying to reteach myself to not compensate too much with the right, because the right side also wants to take over.
Mm.
But
Yeah, I can imagine. So, and are you due a kind of big reunion with the team soon, or how is it kind of looking from?
well, I mean, I think that the situation's still quite fluid. Paulo, our coach, has had pretty regular contact with us. The training block that he's kind of put here in place is more of like a sustainable model. Um, and then as races have been slowly getting back on the calendar, it's kind of at a point where basically most of us have a baseline fitness, um, and then it's just a question of the 6 to 8 weeks before race, just kind of putting back in some of those race intensities.
Mm.
But as for really planning, it's difficult with an international squad. We've got people in Japan, in Australia, several Europeans, we have Americans in the group. There's still quite a few travel bans and restrictions in place. If it's to go somewhere and then you have to do 2 weeks of quarantine, you're seeing a lot of places also that are doing kind of having their second wave.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's still a very, very fluid situation. And it's very much a case by case, because I think, some of us that are Europeans here, we have actually the European Championships coming up in Tartu end of August, and that's a possibility for us. At least I hope.
Yeah.
um, but that's not necessarily the case, or it might not make sense. Maybe for the Americans in the group, or
A lot of people who perhaps follow triathlon don't necessarily realize the amount of travel within the travel to races as well that everyone has to do, and the sort of coordination that all involves. And
hmm
it's pretty rare that, well, let's just say it's far more common that you would be away pretty much for a whole season, right? Like that, it's not like you get many opportunities to just kind of pop home and catch up. It's often from a race situation to
hmm
another training camp and repeat.
yeah, yeah. That's I would say on average I probably spend 10 to 11 months abroad per year.
Mm.
So yeah, I mean somewhere between, normally the month of November, 3 or 4 weeks in November, I'll come home to Belgium, and then I'll have like a week here, a week there, maybe between different races where it makes sense. Maybe the week after Yokohama, spend a week in Belgium, and then go on training camp somewhere in Europe before some of the European races go on, and then maybe after Hamburg or something another week, just kind of depending on how the schedule's set up. But over the years also, it's just become, the calendar's just become really, really full.
Mm.
The number of World Cups has doubled over the last 4 or 5 years. And then you've got a lot of crisscrossing of the globe also, just geographically. um you know you, you, you might do 2 or 3 around the world trips in a season.
Yeah.
um and that's just not that uncommon. And so yeah, there's definitely a lot of travel planning that kind of gets involved. And
Well, and life
yeah.
putting on hold as well, right? I mean, you're married, is that right? Or
No, I'm not
no?
married, but actually we've this is the third time that we've been trying to plan our wedding, and we think with Corona it's going to be postponed again. But
Ah,
it was planned for this October, coming October. But right now in Belgium, there's no like DJs or dancing allowed, and I have family in the US, and I don't think that they're going to be able to travel. So we're going to postpone again. But
no.
one of these days, I think it's like you know Emma and Drew Box. They just got married, and they were always joking about like their super long engagement. Um, yeah, but I think I'm also coming up on 4 or 5 years of it being engaged. But
It comes with the
it's all
territory.
right. But I
Yeah.
mean, for sure, it takes, you need a very um, understanding and patient, family and friends, let's say,
Hmm.
for this kind of lifestyle. That's for sure.
And when and how did you fall into the triathlon lifestyle?
In 2012, 2000, yeah, end of 2011, I moved back to Belgium after finishing my studies in the US. So I'm Belgian American.
Hmm.
I actually got my US citizenship in 2011.
Right.
So that's when I got my double nationality. And But then I came back to Brussels. At that point, I was still doing track and field, so I came kind of from a, and my specialty was steeplechase. Tried to qualify for the London Games for Belgium at that point. Basically, ended up injured, kind of sick of injuries, and started working full time. And was working for the American Chamber of Commerce here in Brussels, and joined a triathlon club. Um, yeah, just for the fun of it, and wasn't really anticipating to race. Met somebody there who's now my fiance, who was really pushing for me to. He's like, "Oh, just try triathlon. I know you just want to come here and swim and run, but we'll find you a bike. We'll lend you a bike. Just give it a try." And I had a blast. And
Mhm.
yeah, then it just kind of, the rest is a bit history.
So what kind
uh,
of age were you when, at that time?
24.
Right.
24. So yeah, a bit, I guess, a bit older compared to, I never had the opportunity really to do the junior or the under 23 um yeah, races, and those compete in those categories. But I ran previously for the University of Oregon, which was still, fairly high level. Um, and so it's not like, let's say, elite sports was completely foreign to me, but the just understanding also. I remember, when somebody from the federation approached me after doing a local race in Belgium, and he said, "Oh, I think you have some talent, you have some potential here. Are you interested in doing, pursuing this maybe as an elite, coming on a national training camp?" And at that point, I was, working full time. I was like, "Oh, I don't know if I want to get back into this." Like, I kind of put that side of,
Mm.
I had to kind of put that aside a little bit, but I did have this dream of going to the Olympics and all of that, and so that just, I thought about it for a while, and then it kind of went progressively, so I kind of started training a bit more, finally invested in buying my first bike, then went to working, sort of like 4/5, if you can call it that. I just kind of worked something out where I could come in an hour later to work and leave an hour earlier, but work on Saturday at home. Um, that way I could get a training in before and after work, and those kind of. So then you go to part time, and
Yeah. Well,
yeah, and you
it's an
just
unusual route to an Olympic
yeah.
start line in a way. Like, did that make it even more surreal, I guess, when you got on the start line in Rio, and to have basically had the Olympic dream and then kind of moved on?
Yeah, I think that there was a little bit of, that childhood dream, like, finally, sort of like, let's say, coming to fruition, and, massive learning curve over those 3-4 years. Like, it's just, it is what it is. Like, I just barely slipped in there, I mean, I was one of the last to qualify, in the Olympic ranking, and so, just getting there in and of itself was already for me like a pretty big achievement. And then, in the end, the race itself didn't play out the way I had. It was far, far below, I think, my expectations, and you know, but at the same time, it gave me a bit of hunger to, okay, I'm going to come back, and we're going to do this better. And I'm not done with this sport. And at the same time, it also, I think that's what led me to joining this international group, was it really had this forced reflection of, okay, what do I want to do with this sport? And you know
Mm.
I've sort of gone to the Olympics, but not at all performed in the way that I know that I'm capable of.
It would be nice then to all going well, Tokyo, you can attack that as an event. There won't be that same, yeah, there'll be nerves, but there won't be that same like leaping into the unknown. Or I just would always imagine that the hoo-ha, the hoopla around an Olympics would be a bit of a distraction for the first time you do it, and then the second time when you've got a little bit more like savvy, then maybe it just makes you able to concentrate on your performance a bit more.
No, I think there is something to that, because there's so much spectacle and so many eyes on the games. It's unlike any other sporting event in the world. And on the other, that's part of the allure. On the other hand, it's like, y- y-
Chance to shine.
yeah, yeah, a chance to shine. And I think it's also kind of goes beyond sport, in the sense that, like, it's a very unique platform, um to kind of, maybe inspire a younger generation, or um just kind of make an impact, let's say, through sport. And it can be really uplifting. It can be unifying for a country, especially, Belgium's quite small. So I mean, there's a lot of opportunity there as well. um I would say that there's definitely, some things that I've learned about, maybe how to manage all of that grandeur and that spectacle, and being kind of pulled in every direction. And also, even it's like, it's kind of silly stuff, but, like, being in the Olympic Village is quite fatiguing, to be honest. It's huge. You're always walking.
Yeah.
It's like just going to the dining hall. You've walked like 4K.
Well, as soon as you step out of your front door, there's going to be someone running past you or jogging somewhere, right? And kind of getting.
Yeah, and it's also, and that's part of the beauty of it as well. Of course, like, it's we were the triathlon was the second to last day. The women's race was, in Rio, and it's hard also not to, you want to watch all these other races, you want to see these other sports, and it's hard to strike that balance between taking it in, and at the same time, being focused on your race and trying to keep it chill,
Yeah, it was the
and just to go
penultimate
through.
day, penultimate
Yeah,
day of the games.
yeah, yeah,
Right.
yeah.
I do.
Hmm.
Yeah, that is something that had occurred to me. How, as these events are slowly kind of, closed off one
Hmm.
by one, the gold medals are rewarded. Then the Olympic Village, like the atmosphere must change from, but the start, everyone being kind of quite tense and focused, and then bit by bit, people would presumably just sort of,
Going to party.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, that there's, I mean, and this understandably so. Also, you can't, the people who are done competing and want to go celebrate that, or are going out, and it's
mm,
like you can't. But if they happen to be your roommate, it's a bit, in the village, you're kind of like,
yeah.
well, I mean, that wasn't the case for me, but I know for some other athletes that that could have been potentially a problem. But
It's a kind of,
I think also that there's the other thing that's come along with this is just like I've really appreciated this time around just the pursuit of excellence, and that's something that I think I've learned a lot from being in the squad and being around other athletes that have kind of in the same Olympic um, process, let's say, is just that's also really rewarding. And um,
mm,
I think that helps also because like you say, it's so much time spent away from home and this and that, but like being around other people who have the same level of dedication and commitment as you, that have the same goals as you, that also kind of like understand, like we kind of have the same social activities, like we're a lot of like Netflix and chill kind of people. And um
that's
so
yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's that helps. It's like having really great colleagues at work, right? I mean, it makes your job so much easier, um, when you've got kind of a good group around you and a good environment around you.
So the Belgian mixed relay team is called the Hammers, right?
Yeah, hammer down.
what's
Yeah.
what's the story there?
Well, first of all, we're waiting for all the other teams out there to come up with their equally cool names.
I think this is absolutely a campaign that we can get behind.
Yeah, Tommy Zafaris told me that he tried to get it going on social, and that for some reason people didn't get it, and they were just like, "Yeah, I'm for Team Australia." I'm like, "No, we're looking for names of teams." But anyways, we're still working on it. No, I mean our national kind of like head coach or team manager, I guess. Um, he was we were on training camp together with the Olympic Committee, and he was showing us this. I think it's Norman Sadler, a long distance athlete, and um, he does this post race interview where he's like, "Well, sometimes you just have to hammer down," and he says it multiple times in his post race interview, and kind of thought that was pretty cool. And then it kind of became the running joke of like, so like we'd go on a training, we'd be like, "Oh, are you like you want to meet up for a ride? Yeah, okay, let's hammer down." And so we just kind of kept saying that, and it kind of became the joke. And then actually at the European Championships in Glasgow in 2018, there was actually quite a bit of press at that event because they had joined. Was it called the European Games? Actually, I'm not even. Anyways, they had a bit more press around that because they had several different sports going at the same time,
Mhm.
and we happened to be third, so we were on the podium, and Martin Van Riel and I are being interviewed at the same time, and because it's Belgium, there was the French-speaking press, which I was speaking to, and then there was the Flemish-speaking press, which was just next to us, who Martin was speaking to, and they were like, "Oh, actually," and also you should know that in Belgium they really like team names,
Mhm.
so I don't know, it's big. Anyways, so Martin and I just kind of looked at each other like, "Oh, great! What's team got third?" Because it's a little bit long to put in a newspaper title like Belgium mixed team relay third at the European Championships. So we were just like, "Oh, we're the Hammers," and then it just stuck.
Bam.
And the next day, yeah, the next day in the newspaper it was like Belgian Hammers third at European Champs, and
Mhm.
um, yeah, and then actually our national manager kind of ran with that. He he made shirts. He made I think we have hats. He made we now have masks.
Beautiful. That's
Yeah, we
a whole other
have
level.
we have Belgian hammer masks. So
What do they look like? Like not in the shape of a hammer.
yeah, it's kind of weird. I'll be honest, like I don't know. I didn't pick out the hammer. It's not my favorite hammer. It kind of looks like a scythe to me. I don't know. Um, yeah, I'm not. I'll be honest, and I'm not a huge fan of the logo itself. I think it's a work in progress, but
Right. But these things can become iconic. You know, I'm picturing the sort of 70s Major League Soccer thing when that kicked off, and all the teams had amazing logos, and you know that's how
Yeah.
shirt sales will go through the roof.
Yeah, and honestly, I think it's also really good because it's forced, at least in Belgium, the national federation also to take. I mean, the sport in general tends to be more masculine, and so it's really forced a bit more of, let's say, equality in funding and in focus and in attention, let's say, to men and women to field full teams, and also because in our case, um, there's kind of been the four of us, Martin, Yella, Valerie, and myself. But if one of us is injured or has a problem, we were a bit hard pressed in the beginning to have an alternate.
Mm.
And in some of these other, like, you look at Team France, and they're like,
Deep.
which of our top 30 athletes are we going to put today? And they'll have a very good team every time.
Mm.
And so, but I mean, there's also, I think, in maybe in some smaller countries where maybe they don't have also the depth, that forcing that sort of focus on the balance between a men's and a women's program is really positive for the sport. And I also think it's super dynamic and fun to watch, and even fun for us as athletes. It's incredibly painful, but it's really fun to watch,
Yeah.
and
So it's
fun to
red line the
do.
whole time, and
Yeah, and you can redo the same race with the same lineup, and you're gonna have, like, the next day, and you're gonna have a different outcome probably.
mm.
And so that's like, because it's just filled of these, like, really minute moments that are like just game changers.
Mm.
And it's like, oh, either you made that breakaway or you didn't, or you didn't clip your helmet fast enough in transition and it's gone, or that person, like, just was able to tag on, and then the next person was able to close the gap in the swim, that kind of thing.
Mm.
And I think even among us, like, the day after a race, we'll, like, among the squad, we'll be like out on a
Um,
on a training ride or a run, and we're just like, yeah, and then that, and this happened and that happened, and we replay that race over and over. We're like, yeah, but if this team had put this person first instead, and playing out those dynamics over and over again. And that's what's
yeah.
fun about the mixed team relay.
And presumably you've been in close touch with the Paolo and the guys like throughout the lockdown. But have you got the sense that some people have very much kind of coped with the last few months better than others, or do you think there's a general feeling that people have got on with it okay?
Um, yeah, I mean, it's different for everybody, and that's normal. Also, I think some people, when I had very much mixed emotions also when the Olympics were canceled, because I couldn't. I mean, I just my my heart broke also for the people who were maybe planning retirement around this year, people who were maybe wanting to start a family, people who maybe are also self-financing their way to the games, and
Yeah.
an extra year is also, like, really financially draining for them. So I think it's completely normal that people are handling it differently. But what's also been, you know speaking with chatting with each other also helps, because um you just can lean on that a little bit to also get some support, especially if you're having, like, motivational dips, and
Yeah.
um, you know.
That you came into the sport from having that professional career in the Chamber of Commerce in Belgium and so on. Was that something that made you realise that becoming part of the athlete committee and perhaps taking an active role in that side of it, did that feel like a very natural thing for you to get involved with?
I think what the president of triathlon in Belgium, former, I guess, had suggested, that he said, oh yeah, it's every 4 years, they elect a new athletes committee, that they, um, they're kind of looking for more candidates, and so on and so forth. And so myself and another Belgian triathlete, Simon de Kuiper, we were both like, oh, okay, well, we'll give it a shot. I do tend to be an organizer, and I tend to be kind of like sometimes they'll call me, like, squad mom. Um, uh, and and I do have, like, especially when there's things that I see, like, because I'm kind of the philosophy in general that I'm not really, you can complain about things if you want, but if you don't have a solution to bring to the table, then you just better not say anything at all. So I'm more in like a solution oriented person in general. And and I think that that's also like a little bit of what has kind of what draws me to the athletes committee is like, and I think also the older and you are and the more you kind of develop in the sport and see how the sport develops. Another thing that they call me in the squad is Curious Claire, and that is because yeah, I just like, if I'm like, well, geez, I wonder, like, why did they double the number of World Cups, and why are like,
Yeah.
and I start to look at these things, or like,
Don't
man,
just
why?
accept it as a thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I just get really curious, and I'm one of those people that's like, why? Oh, and I wonder why is this? And then I start researching, and then I look into it more, and I'm like, huh, and then I talk to other people about it, and so that's just kind of, I guess that's in my personality as it is.
Mm.
That being said, I also had to set myself some limits because I can get very curious and I can get very in depth into subjects, and um but my role right now is still as an athlete first. And so, I knew I didn't want to have like a chair position. Thomas taught an IUA to do that very well. And, I help more, let's say, as like a secretary role. And, um, I'll do a lot of like meeting minutes or research, or, whatever, maybe prepare like a position paper, write things in the background. And we just kind of do different projects also. But it's been interesting because it's helped me also understand the sport better, um, from all sides of it, from the financial side, the media side, how are race contracts and so on created, and what are some of the impediments also to maybe some of the things that athletes have been asking to improve for a
Mm.
while. And to be honest, I mean, it's a developing sport. Like, triathlon is young, um, and it's still developing and growing, and so it's kind of interesting to be a part of that.
Do you feel that there's a good atmosphere within the athletes that they can be heard and that they can um, have a voice, and that is there a
um
strong support network there
yeah.
for you guys, do you feel?
Well, I mean, we've got two different subjects here. I mean, the first thing is that, yeah, this particular like lockdown period, obviously there's no races. Trying to set up criteria for when we can race again. What kind of creates a fair playing field? These are all questions that we've had to explore. How maybe would we adapt, the Olympic criteria and restarting races again, and looking at all those. So that's, we've actually had pretty regular contact, I would say. There's 12 of us also in the athletes committee, and we were having fairly regular contact with ITU about all those decisions. And it's obviously an unprecedented situation, so you're kind of drawing also from experience. You're looking at what other sports are doing,
Mm.
to try to get a sense of, okay, what makes sense here, what's going to be most fair. And again, like, really stepping into the shoes of as best as you can of other athletes. And that's why also it's been interesting, even for me to like be listening to the other podcasts and to be chatting with my other teammates and squad mates, is um just to understand how they've experienced this lockdown period and what would make sense for being able to start up and race again. um as for the question, of safe sport and anti-harassment, and you know I think the shocking kind of news of Troy's death, um that was just really devastating. And maybe it's also because of this lockdown period that maybe I'm not looking to become like, the necessarily the advocate. Don't have any personal experience, and it's also that, I just don't think I'm necessarily the voice for this. But at the same time, this lockdown period has granted me also much more time for reflection. And um, again, maybe it's the age thing that's just like turning my filter off a little bit. But I think that that's just not okay. The question of abuse in sports is really global. And um I think you really have a combination also of you've got a high performance, hyper competitive environment on the administrative side of things, and then you've got athletes that tend to be young and ambitious and driven and will kind of do what they're told. And I think that if I just think back to myself or most of the other athletes that I know, if you think of the five most influential people in our lives, barring maybe parents, the rest are going to be teachers or coaches, probably.
Mm.
Um, and that says a lot also about the impact, positive or negative, that like a coach or administrator can have on an athlete's life. But um, I think sport can be so powerful in a good way, and it's just absolutely tragic when it's used and like when it's abused. That position of power is really, in authority is abused over athletes. And you know, I was I just thought it was important to say something about it because you never know who that might reach and who that might help. And I do think that ITU can take a role, and as you look through like the policy that they have in place, following the IOC, is that there is kind of this encouragement for all national federations, to put these systems and mechanisms in place to report, also just to be able to recognize what is physical abuse, what is verbal abuse, what is like mental psychological abuse, but I think it's important to just like have a bit more of an eye out for it. And again, that's where I think some kind of yearly at least training, on how to witness, how to detect it is one thing, and then where at least you need to know where to communicate it, and that needs to be like readily available.
Thanks to the ever eloquent and interesting Claire Michel for coming on the podcast and discussing those important subjects. The triathlon.org website now has a permanent link to the anti-harassment guidelines she mentions and a contact email address. Next week, I'll be talking to Arild Tveiten, Norway's head coach and the man spearheading the country's incredible recent success. Thanks for listening.